Okay, welcome everyone to our next workshop in a series of workshops this year. So today we're going to be looking at the role of preprints in materials engineering research. So I want to give you a bit of background information. There's hopefully you'll see this on your link. There's a database called Sherpa Romeo Journal Open Access Information. So it's a really useful database for looking up open access policies for individual journals. So everything from Wiley to Elsevier, etc. You can go to this link. You can find information about embargo periods, costs of various open access options, etc. So there's just a quick link there. But I thought before we began, I thought it might be useful to talk about open access, because a lot of the preprints and postprints and all of these kind of developments have very much taken or very much developed in this whole sort of climate of open access. So what is open access? So basically open access is kind of a publishing and distribution model that makes scholarly research literature, which is of course funded by taxpayers around the world, freely available to anyone who has internet access. So for researchers here at UBC, so graduate students, faculty, the UBC Library and many other PhD granting institutions around the world have access to essentially the same cluster of journals. You know, we subscribe to pretty much everything from Elsevier, from Wiley, from Springer, et cetera, et cetera. We basically have amazing collections to support the research that goes on here at UBC. Now, there are a lot of institutions, of course, especially in the developing world, that may not have necessarily access to everything published by Elsevier. So when people make their research available through open access, you're essentially opening your research or making your research freely available to anyone around the world. And I know I've spoken to researchers in Earth and Ocean Sciences, and they go to South America and they're working at a smaller research institute. They don't necessarily have everything from Wiley or Elsevier at their fingertips. So that is one advantage of open access. Of course, you have to pay, or the university pays, or the granting agencies like NSERC pay, but the advantage of open access is that you are making your research available to anyone around the world. And there's a very nice link here for, if you want to learn more about what open access is, you can click on this link and learn more about open access. But it's a great development. I remember when it was initially announced at UBC, a lot of faculty were concerned, who's paying, how will this change how I do my research? And now I would have to say, all in all, it's become sort of, I don't want to say second nature, but once people figure out who pays, and it's by no means an inexpensive proposition, because Elsevier and Wiley charge thousands of dollars to make their articles open access, which essentially comes from your research grant. So it's not it's free to the end user, but it's not free to researchers. Someone has to pay for this. So when it comes to open access publishing in Canada, a lot of the three main publishing agencies, so NSERC, the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, who funds probably a lot of your research. So there's NSERC, there's CIHR, Canadian Institute of Health Research, CIHR, and SSHRC, which is, I can never remember what SSHRC stands for, but it's a social sciences granting agency in Canada. Those three granting agencies kind of determine Canada's policy on open access publishing. Now, one thing I should mention is that if you've published an article and your funder is not NSERC, you don't have to worry about any, complying with their policies. But you'll see that by looking at NSERC's policy, so grant recipients can publish in a journal that offers, you have a couple options here, offers immediate open access, which means it's gold open access. You pay Elsevier, $3,500, $40,000, $5,000 US, and that article is automatically open to anyone in the world. So you don't, this is from anyone from, the developing world, anyone from, downtown, someone's home in Vancouver, anywhere in the world, they can access that article. Now, there's other options in terms of making your publishers sometimes can make your article available within 12 months. So it's a 12-month embargo period. Now you'll see some journals require authors to pay APCs, article processing charges, to make your manuscripts freely available. And that's the cost that's theoretically going to come out of your NSERC grant. And you'll see this is from the NSERC page. The cost of publishing in open access journals is an eligible expense under the use of grant funds. So if we click on this link, it'll take you to this document, and there's the Tri-Agency Open Access Policy and Publications, and there's our three what are the downsides of open access beside the cost? I can't think of a downside because why wouldn't, I mean, if you paid the money, let's say you published in an Elsevier journal, you paid the X number of thousands of US dollars, and the article is freely available to anyone, so this is not just universities, it could be companies, let's say, somebody at Tech or at Kaminko or at a major research, a major company wants to look at your research. Let's say somebody is filing for a patent and your research is really important to them. Or let's say it's a governmental agency from around the world. They want to see your research. I can't really think of a downside to open access, because essentially you're just opening access to not just everyone in the academic world, so everyone from Caltech to UBC to Toronto to Oxford, Cambridge, all the major universities around the world. They will already have access to your article because they subscribe to Elsevier, Wiley, etc. But of course, there's the world beyond the PhD granting institution world, and that's the world of people who, well, firstly, can't afford to subscribe to Elsevier, as an example. I don't want to pick on Elsevier or Wiley, etc. But there's also, people who can't afford it, institutions who can't afford it, and of course, granting agencies who would also like to see the research as soon as possible. So if there are downsides, I'd have to look into it further, but I'd say that anytime you can make your research more accessible, more citable, more findable, you're just sharing it with far more people than originally thought. So your supervisor, is there against it? Why publish at all then? I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear their feedback on that. But I think anytime you make your research more accessible, it's a good thing for everyone involved. So this is the preamble about the tri-agency policy, and you can go read through this. They talk about promoting open access, the policy objectives. They talk about online repositories, and we're going to get to this in a couple of minutes, but Circle is one example of an online repository. And then we talk about journals. We talk about you can either publish for immediate open access or to look for make your research available online within 12 months, etc. So all of this information is contained on the Tri-Agency Open Access Policy website, and that's contained in our document. Now, there's a lot of different types of open access. So there, for example, I've given you an example here of gold open access, and gold open access is basically you've paid the money and anyone can access them at any time. So I'll show you some examples of that in a minute, but here's a really nice website or link here from Elsevier that kind of describes the differences between green open access and gold open access. And there's a lot of shades in between, to be honest. So we can look in this website, and just to give you kind of a sense of what kind of information is here. Okay, so this is the website. So the benefits for communities and stakeholders, for universities, for low-income countries. So that's, we're talking about the benefits. Okay, and to talk about sharing your own work to the world, etc., etc. And here's some examples about gold open access. So you've got a couple options. You can publish in an open access journal, or you can also pay the APCs, the article page charges or author page charges, and make it available right away. Or you can do you have some other options. So in terms of your postprint, in other words, the peer-reviewed version of your article. And of course, they talk about the fees. It's paid by the author or on behalf of on their behalf, for example, by the institution or a funding body. And our example would be NSERC. Now, the library, many well-funded libraries, and especially in the United States, have a lot more money than we do. Being in Canada, we deal with all kinds of crazy exchange rates between the euro, between the US dollar, and we do have some open access policy or open access programs. For example, if you publish with the Electrochemical Society, we cover the APC charges for their journals, but we don't really have sufficient funding to make every single article published by a UBC researcher gold open access. We're just not in that position. And then you can talk about, so there's gold, there's green. So lots of good information here in terms of what is the difference between gold and green, etc. So green is often, there's a, they put their, you put your postprint on Circle as an example, which is our independent repository, or you can put it on your own website, all kinds of different options. But gold open access is where the article is available to anyone in the world via the publisher's website. So some good information here. So they talk about benefits of open access for communities and stakeholders, for low-income countries, et cetera, et cetera. So I think sometimes when you're at a major university and you have everything at your fingertips, it's easy to think about, or forget about rather, who doesn't have access to this content. And that's why there are some major benefits of open access. So what I thought I would do now is I thought I'd go into the Web of Science, and I'm going to look for some UBC publications, and I'll show you some UBC publications, some UBC journal articles that are gold open access, green open access, etc. So I'm going to click on the Web of Science link, and I've to the Web of Science. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an address search, and I'm going to search for everyone here. So materials engineering here at UBC. So we're going to use some really arcane language. Materials, same engineering, same Vancouver, same British Columbia. And this will find all the articles written by people here in the Department of Materials Engineering, here, which is located in the city of Vancouver, which is located in the province of British Columbia. Okay, so we've got almost 2,000 articles written by folks here at UBC. And what we're going to do is we're going to go look at, just for the fun of it, the last couple of years, because open access didn't exist probably, maybe it's been around for a while, but it's really taken off, I'd say, in the last 5 years or so. So we're going to look at the last 2021 through 2022. And you'll see, you'll see who's published in the largest number of articles. So David Dreisinger, Edward, Frank Coe, etc. Geez, I know these guys really well here. And who else I recognize? John Madden, Anoush, Chad Sinclair, etc., etc. So let's go back to our filters, and you'll see that we've got some articles, some review papers, etc. And you'll see affiliation information, of course, where these articles are being published, the various publishers. So I know there's a question about MDPI. It's become an open access publisher. So we've got Elsevier, Springer, American Chemical Society, Wiley, funding agencies. So this is where you'll see all the various funding agencies that are mentioned in the journal article. So you'll see that there's NSERC, National Science Foundation of China. So of course, you don't really need to worry about if your research was published or funded by, let's say, the Ministry of Education in Japan or MyTax, et cetera, all you need to do is worry about any requirement they have in terms of making the research that they funded openly available. They may not have any requirements at all, but of course we'll see here that there's two major granting agencies, so NSERC and CHR is listed here, but because we just talked about it a second ago, the NSERC is requiring all NSERC funded research to be made openly available through open access. So you can click on this link, and what we'll do is we'll click on Refine. And now you'll see that for the last 2 years, there's 28 articles that have been funded by NSERC. So here's an article on methods X, and you'll see if you scroll down, we'll go to, okay, what was I looking for? Affiliations, publishers, open access. So here you'll see all the variations on open access. Now, I must admit, I'm free to read. I'm not familiar with that one, but what we can do is let's look at the gold open access articles. So we can click on Refine, and now here's an article published in Methods X. There's polymers. Let's go look at this first one. Okay, so you see that it's free text from the free full text from the publisher. And you'll also see that, so free published article from the repository. And we're going to be talking about repositories in a few minutes as well. So which repository? So what we can do is we can click on this link and they say, so this was an article published in, and once again, we're going to go to address information. Luckily enough, it's, same there. Saved us a little bit of time. And let's go look at last 3 years for the fun of it. So click on Refine, 198 articles. And then what we can do from here, if we like, is you'll see our authors again, and you'll see the affiliation information, the journals where this research is published, the funding agency, you'll see NSERC, etc. And let's scroll down and look at the open access links. So now we've got, let's look at the gold hybrid. Now, there should be an information here about gold hybrid. Sometimes it's not always clear as to what the difference is. Okay, but let's go look at the gold articles. Click on Refine. Okay. Let's run this again. Sorry. Okay. Just for fun, let's get the last 5 years. Click on Search, 386 articles. And let's scroll down once again and go to our open access. And 62 articles. And so, for example, I'm going to find something a little bit older. Let's look at this one. Okay, from 2021, click on the title, and you see the free text is full from the publisher. And you will see other articles that mention, okay, so we scroll down, you'll see that this article is open access. So Dan Major and the team have paid for the open access fees, and this article should be freely available to anyone around the world. So you see a link here that shows open access. What I like to do, though, is go back to the results, and I want to show you some examples. Okay, let's look at this one. So there's Edward, and you'll see, okay, I thought there's one. No, that's not the one I want to look at. Sorry. No, I'm going to go to another example where the research is actually on Arxiv. So there's a couple major preprint repositories or preprint servers. Arxiv is one of them. And what I really wanted to show you is, let's go to corrosion. Oh, I'm sorry. Full text. So here's an example. So this article would not be freely available to anyone around the world. But let's go back to our results and narrow this down by open access. So we're going to get all open access. Click on Refine. And okay. A lot of people are using this as a repository. Let's go back to our results. Just bear with me for a second. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Free full text and a publisher, which is open access. Of course, all of our results are from our open access journals. But really what I want to show you is free full text. Now, 1 second here. Okay, here's also free text. What I wanted to show you is an example. I found it yesterday. I'm sorry about this, but it was an example where some of the articles were available. Which repository is this? So here's an example of an article that's been uploaded onto Arxiv. So there's Chad Sinclair. You'll see the materials information affiliation, the co-authors, and you'll see that this article has been submitted to Arxiv. So Arxiv is but one of many preprint servers that exist, and Arxiv has been around for at least, well, the physics version of Arxiv has been around at least 30 years. So here's an example, but there's been more versions, like there's a ChemRxiv, there's a materials engineering section of Arxiv. So there's been a real growth in our preprint servers. So I think that the challenge really is to choose the best one. But here's an example where the original article was submitted to Arxiv, and because it's a preprint server, anyone around the world can access this content. The thing to be aware of course, is that content that's on a preprint server has not been peer reviewed. So, the review has not gone through review. So, the data may be may not be quite as reliable, or the figures may not add up. But it's always important that you're aware of the difference between a preprint server, which is non-peer reviewed research, and a postprint server or postprint article, where the article has gone through peer review. It just hasn't been laid out in the final version that you will see published in a journal article. So here's an example, like I say, of an article has been uploaded onto Arxiv, written by Chad Sinclair et al. And Sayavash and Jorg. So researchers here at UBC, so folks from the quantum materials to QMI, etc. Web of Science. And you can also discover, using the Scopus database as well, you can discover the same kind of information. But this is a real quick and easy way to find out, what kind of open access research is being published within your department. And then from there, you can discover, well, who's doing it, maybe good contacts for you to good people to talk about or talk with, what was their experience uploading their article to Arxiv or ChemRxiv, whatever the case may be. And then from there, let's go to choose them all. Okay. So there's our 59 articles, and you'll see that, where the research has been published. And I think if you look over the last 10 years, you'll see a continuous trend, of course, of more and more articles being published open access. And of course, if you get funding from NSERC, that probably is a major incentive. So there's our, so our free text link will just take us back to, so once again, back to Arxiv. So we've got like I said, the Arxiv version, yet another article from Arxiv, modeling a relationship between deformed microstructures. And if we go to the full text, and so there's the full text version, and then we can view the PDF. Now, I don't see an open access link. I'm not sure why, but you'll see that we can view the PDF version, and there it is. So what you probably have to do is, you've got the abstract, which is nicely laid out. So you've got all the Elsevier stuff, the journal, the DOI, so available online, received, when it's published, so on and so forth. And of course, they've got it all looks very, very nice. Everything is, the columns line up, and I'm sure, all the figures line up, and the figures contain what they're supposed to, because the peer reviewers have probably made some comments, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the final version. So you've got the the archive version, which is that's how it looks there. And you can scroll through this. So there's the figures, but you see it looks a whole lot different than the final version that you can see on the publisher's website. So just two examples. Okay, so back to so we've looked at Web of Science, and like I say, Scopus and Web of Science, two really important databases for materials engineering. You can do very similar searches. So looking at, you can do an affiliation search, or you can just search a key, just do any kind of, keyword search or author search, and restrict your search to open access journals. Of course, as a UBC student or as UBC researchers, there's absolutely no value to that, because for the most part, almost all the content should be available to you through the UBC library's journal subscriptions. So some background information about green open access and to gold open access. So what are preprints? So there's always some questions about the language around preprints, postprints, preproofs. I've seen all kinds of versions on that. So basically, a preprint can be defined as the author's version of a research manuscript prior to formal peer review. So I'm sure if you're following, developments in the COVID world, there's all kinds of articles that are being uploaded to a preprint server called bioRxiv, and people are trying to get their research out as fast as possible regarding various aspects of COVID-19, all the ins and outs around COVID, etc. But the thing to remember always about preprints is they are not peer-reviewed. So I'm sure a lot of those peer-reviewed content that's been added to the bioRxiv website or preprint server regarding COVID-19, I'm sure a lot of that will be either revised considerably, withdrawn, etc. So peer reviews always, or preprints rather, are always not peer-reviewed. So it's they're manuscripts prior to formal peer review. Okay, so there's a link here from the Springer website about preprint sharing. There's also another nice link here from the Wiley website regarding preprint policies, and you can click on these and you can look at their policies. It tells you about what's allowed, open access, licensing implications, etc. So the reason I have links from different publishers is that everyone has a different policy. So if you're publishing in an Elsevier journal, have a look at their preprint policies. If it's Wiley, if it's MDPI, every publisher or every society has different policies. I mean, a lot of them are very similar, but the onus is really on you to look at the policies for that specific journal and for that specific publisher. So what are journal postprints or preproofs? So basically, a postprint or a preproof is an article that has gone through peer review, but they're still not, they still haven't been, they're not quite ready yet to go into the final journal version of the article. They may have to do some typesetting, maybe some copy editing, maybe some language that needs to be tidied up, etc. But there's a nice link here from the Elsevier website. And Elsevier's journal platform is called Science Direct. So if you click on this link, you'll see some information here about what are journal preproofs. So lots of background information, and they always have a DOI, and a DOI is the digital object identifier, and that's the very unique code that links any browser to that specific article. So doi.org/the DOI. So every article will have a DOI, and they talk about corrected proofs, uncorrected proofs. You can spend a lot of time looking at this, but basically a preproof has been peer reviewed, and that's the critical difference. There's a nice website here from Wiley, another major publisher, that talks about self-archiving. The accepted version of their articles incorporates all amendments made during the peer review process. So that's a postprint, and so on. So so we're halfway through. So here's some major examples of preprint servers. Now, I can't really advise you one over the other. I would probably go back to maybe do like a Web of Science search. I saw, a couple articles Sinclair was using Arxiv. So there is a section with a preprint server within the Arxiv deals with materials engineering, and you can link on this list here, and you can see all the most recent submissions. You can go through this, and so SPICE, nanoparticles, so on and so forth. So a lot of this is really heavy-duty physics, or material science from a physics perspective. But we did see some articles, written, some preprints that were in the material science page from UBC researchers. So this is how Arxiv looks from material science, and Arxiv, like I said, has been, from the physics perspective, has been going on a very long time. So another really good website is called ChemRxiv.org, and we can go to their website, and this is really taken off for the last few years. Okay, so here's a ChemRxiv page. This is nice because it's supported by the American Chemical Society, Royal Society of Chemistry, the Society for German Chemists, etc. And they've got some nice, you can browse subject headings or browse the areas here. So if you go to material science, you can see the most recent content here. Materials chemistry, here's an article. And I think you can do some really general keyword searching. Okay. Okay, just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, search term, and this worked for me last time. I'll try this. Okay. Okay, so 61 articles. Who's somebody I recognize right away here? So it's Curtis Berlin-Quet, Berlin-Gaddish today. And I think, okay, let's go to material science. Okay. And I think I saw one. Okay. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So some people we recognize here. So there's Edward. So this is the version on ChemRxiv. So I've also mentioned this in the document, but I think it's really important to be aware of preprint servers that allow you versioning. So you see that there's 3 versions of this article, and of course, why would you have multiple versions? Well, of course, maybe there's a gap in your analysis, or maybe someone who looked at the first version of your preprint said, perhaps you should look at the crucial article written in 1978 by Smith, Jones, Zhang, and Wang that talks about X, Y, and Z. Perhaps you should look at that article, and because it's really important for something that you discuss. So sometimes you will see multiple versions of an article, and that's probably just to make the article better, more readable, more comprehensive, clarify some inconsistencies or things that need clearing up. And that's why preprint servers should allow you to have multiple versions, because very seldom do you write a perfect article the first time around. Oftentimes there's something you may want to clarify. Maybe you want to clarify the figures that you've used and make them more easier to interpret, better headings. Maybe there's a gap in the data that you provided in your journal article. All kinds of reasons that you could come up with to make multiple versions. So that's what's nice about ChemRxiv and Arxiv as well, is that you can do versioning. Now, the fact that this article has a DOI means it's citable. So someone could come across this article, publish an article, their own research, and cite the specific preprint that they found in ChemRxiv. And now, how many downloads? So there's been, for this preprint that came out, when did this come out? Well, version 3 came out, version 1 came out in November of last year, and it's already been downloaded almost 1,800 times. There's been 438 views. So obviously this article must have a little bit of traction. Hopefully because it's on ChemRxiv, it's easy to find. That's something you really want to think about as well. Choose a a repository that has lots of traffic, lots of people going to it, so that you can make your article or preprint easier to find. And lastly, there's the download link, and you can look at the preprint version. So pretty plain, no markup, no copy editing, some figures. And you could probably always go back and look at, the previous versions. How's version 3? If you have lots of time on your hands, look at version 1, compare version 1 to version 3, etc., etc. But this article, I'm assuming, will, once it's gone through peer review. I'm not sure if it says where it's been submitted. In the new version, okay. Here's something useful. We improve the explanation of experimental method to add more clarity, more to clarify the analysis in figures 3 and 4. So some good versioning. And sooner or later, I'm not sure, I'd have to ask the people involved, what their ultimate plans are, but I'm assuming that they've gone through all this work, that it will eventually be submitted to a journal for final publication. So this is an example of ChemRxiv. Okay. So and the Electrochemical Society also has their own archive. An Electrochemical Society, just so you know, the library supports or pays all author page charges for Electrochemical Society. So if you're publishing with them, it's totally free because the UBC library is covering the costs. So one of the few publishers we can actually do that. A nice little article here about Ginsberg, Lessons from Archives, 30 Years of Information Sharing. And it kind of talks about the whole culture, the culture around preprints, especially from the physics perspective and what they've learned. And I think there's hundreds of millions of downloads every year. Like it's an amazing source. And all the physics professors I know and all the physics webinars and seminars I've ever gone to, people in physics always cite the archive version of their article. They never go to the American Physical Society, like PhysRevD or Applied Physics, etc. They always cite the archive version because that's where, in the physics world, everyone goes first. Okay, so some really nice background about the kind of scientific culture around preprint servers. And so Ginsberg is a physicist, and he kind of set up the whole thing, and it's been going for about 30 years, and it's a really interesting article. Unfortunately, the folks in chemistry and the other scientific disciplines are a little bit late to the field, probably no thanks to the major science societies, but I'll stop there. So why submit your research to a preprint server? So the folks at ChemRxiv have a really nice website, a really nice page talking about all the good reasons why you should make your research available as a preprint. Okay, so why should you do it? Gather feedback and context from fellow scientists. Disseminate your work to a wide audience. Priority and precedence. You want to be first. Boost the visibility, make research work more discoverable, find potential collaborators. So perhaps you're submitting for a grant, rapid evaluation of results, spot trains that encourage a broad range of constructive feedback. So lots of good reasons to why you might want to submit to a preprint server or make your research available as a preprint first. So ChemRxiv gives a really nice overview as to all the reasons you want to do that. Now, some things to be aware of when submitting when you're making your research available as a preprint. Now, typically the preprint information, excuse me, is always found in your guide for author submission section of a journal. So there's a weapon, so this is from Material Science and Engineering A from Elsevier, and there's a little section here, guide for authors. Read this information very, very carefully. And if they don't make any specific mention about preprints, and this is a journal you're thinking about submitting your article to, contact the editorial board, because you do not want because you've submitted your research to a preprint server, you do not want, sometimes you'll see that submitting a preprint may prevent you from publishing your article in a specific journal. So let's say you have your heart, you've identified, let's say, Nature Materials. You're going to submit your article to Nature Materials, and you thought it was a great idea to make your research available as a preprint first. Well, and lo and behold, you discover that Nature Materials does not allow for research to be published as preprints. So submitted as a preprint, because that is considered pre-publication. Now, so the onus is on you to, I would say, and the reason I've highlighted this is because it's really, really, really important. Because some journals' policies towards pre-publications, they may have specific policies about pre-publication, specifically as preprints. And submitting a preprint may prevent you from publishing an article in a specific journal. And I would say my experience is looking at, preparing for this workshop and looking at, I don't know how many different journals. Some of them are very, very clear, where they say we have absolutely no issues about, we do not consider preprints as a pre-publication. They make it very clear that it's totally fine. I've seen other journal policies where it's totally vague. So what to do when it's vague and you're not sure? Always, when in doubt, contact the journal editor or someone on the editorial board. Don't trust, what you read on the internet. The onus is on you to contact the journal editor and be very, very clear what their policies are as it refers to preprint and pre-publication. So what I would do is, it may sound like a bit of work, come up with a wish list of, 10 or 15 journal articles. I'm not sure if that's too many or too few in materials engineering. And those can range everything from, journals like Nature Materials, or Science, those journals that have, 80% rejection rates, to everything in between. Come up with a list of journals where you think you would like to publish. And then once you've done that, go to those individual journals, look at their publication policies regarding preprint publication, and that way you'll know clearly what the policies are for those journals, because I think that's a really, really important thing. Okay, so there's a really nice link from Elsevier. And I really like this link. I'll show you how this looks. And this is from the editor's perspective, but I mean, that's equally as important. I've seen this somewhere before. What counts as prior publication? And they have guidelines to help editors determine what prior research should be considered formally published. So there's a nice link here. They talk about authors are increasingly sharing the results of research in different ways beyond traditional journal articles and even more varied formats. I mean, YouTube, modeling, etc., data sets, etc. Okay, so why do journals have policies prohibiting prior or simultaneous public submission? So you can click on this link. So lots of really good links on this page to from the folks at Elsevier. Okay, and they talk about originality, redundancy, etc., etc. So some good background information, confidentiality, originality, reporting standards, etc., etc. So lots of really good information from this Elsevier page. So they talk about policies prohibiting prior publication, implications. So here it says Elsevier has previously clarified does not view an abstract, academic thesis, or preprint to be prior publication, because these are deemed to be provide different and complementary services to formal journal publications. I would say that always still go to the publisher's website, because when you contact the publisher, or pardon me, the journal's website, when you contact the editor, they have the final say. That's what I would base my decision on. But like I say, there's lots of good background information about preprints, policies around preprints, etc. And that's a really nice link I found on the website, the Elsevier website. And there's also questions about submissions to preprints, preprint servers, and journal submissions. And I've seen this with data sets. Sometimes if you're submitting a data set to a data repository, sometimes they want the data set embargoed until the journal article has gone through peer review, etc. So that's another potential question to ask or to investigate, is to think about the timing of when you, let's say you're thinking about publishing in a specific journal, you've got a list, you might want to contact them, someone on the editorial board, and ask them, if there's any issues around the timing of when you submit your preprint to the preprint server versus when you start the formal journal submission process. So just another thing to think about. Now, one of the other questions came up with online repositories. So there's a couple of approaches here. So there's a link here from the to the Circle or to the NSERC website that talks about online repositories. So grant recipients can deposit their final peer-reviewed manuscript, so the postprint, into an institutional or disciplinary repository. So in our example, or in the UBC example, that would be the Circle database, the Circle digital repository. There's another option here, so you can do that same with journals. Can publish in a journal that offers immediate open access, where you pay the money, or that offers open access on its website within 12 months. So many Elsevier journals, their embargo is actually 24 months, which means you're sort of compelled to pay their page charges to make that article open access. But theoretically, that should come out of your NSERC grant. So now when it comes to digital repositories, and specifically here at UBC, the UBC library digital repository is called Circle, and there's a very nice link here to a PDF document that outlines the various steps. So they talk about Author's Guide to Self-Archiving Publication Versions and Permissions. So self-archiving, publishing agreements and permissions. And they talk about preprint, postprint, and published. And there should be some contact information. So if you have any questions about how to submit your postprint in Circle, email the folks at Circle, UBC Circle at ubc.ca, and they will be able to help you out. Okay, so what role do digital repositories play in hosting preprints? So basically, this is kind of, they make your content freely available. I know a number of years ago, I uploaded a number of preprints co-authored by Warren Poole to Circle, and they're findable through Circle. And of course, because they're a postprint, so in other words, they haven't gone through the whole final editing, layout, all of that. There's a link from the Circle page. If you looked up Warren Poole's postprints on Circle, you'll see that there's a final link to the version, the official version that's hosted on, I think, either Elsevier or Springer, those two publishers. So once again, that's what role Circle plays. They host your postprint, and then within the postprint record, there'll be a link to the final perfect version that's available through the journal. Now, so you've submitted your article, your preprint to Arxiv or ChemRxiv or whatever other preprint server you've come across. Now, will the world start, knocking on your door and sending you emails and saying, hey, this is great, or perhaps you'd think about correcting it, or how about, can we co-publish something in the future? Great research. How do people find it? Well, there's a number of ways that people can find your article once you've uploaded it to a preprint server. You can use, hopefully all of you have ORCID IDs. An ORCID ID is just a unique ID specific to your name. And when you have an ORCID ID, you can create your own sort of profile. There's all of your previous publications, all your previous work, seminars, your academic history, your master's or PhD dissertation. You can put all kinds of amazing stuff there. So you can promote your research through your ORCID ID. You can so there's a really good link here from Elsevier, how to use your 10 reasons to get and use an ORCID ID. And we can click on this link. Ooh, geez, what happened there? Okay. I'll go back and change this. Maybe I put on, okay, I'm going to I'm not gonna, I don't risk losing you guys. I'll go back and fix this link in a few minutes. There's a link here in terms of how to create your own ORCID ID. And what you can always do, obviously, is just go to Google, much like what I've done, is go to Google and type in using ORCID ID to promote your research. I mean, that should give you some very good results. You, of course, can do things like use social media. I'm not the world's biggest social media person. I've got a Twitter account, and basically what I do with my Twitter account is I tweet new articles that I see published by UBC researchers. I try to tweet about new developments, new journal articles, new books. I don't tweet about anything outside of that little world, because then you just you go to dark places, right? So that's what I use Twitter for. I don't have a Facebook account because, like I say, my social media presence is pretty much restricted to my web page, emails I send out from time to time, and my various tweets on science-related things. So there's a really nice way, the American Geophysical Union, which is a neuroscience publisher, but you can always see how people in neurosciences are promoting how to improve your impact with citations and collaborations. There's a really nice Zenodo link here that you can click on, and they give you all kinds of useful tips and practices and things to do in terms of impact, increasing the impact of your preprints, your research, so on and so forth. Now, I know another one of the questions we had was about evaluating journals. So there's a number of different ways you can evaluate a journal. One way is you can go to the journal's website. You can look at the people on the editorial board. Are these the people who are on the board? Are they all credible scientists? Are they all well-recognized researchers in their area? That's one way, assuming that you have a good sense of who the important researchers are out there. Another way is that you can go to a database called the Journal Citation Reports. So when you search the Web of Science database, you're searching all journals that have been gone through that are also hosted on Journal Citation Reports. So I'm sure that some of you have heard about high impact journals. So what is a high impact journal? So there's things like high impact journals, impact factors. So impact factors come from the folks at the Web of Science, and specifically from Journal Citation Reports. So if you want to recognize, identify, let's say, really important journals in materials engineering, what you can do is, forget that. So this is JCR, and every single journal that's in the Web of Science is also in JCR, because what happens is that when new journals are published, or new journals are come out, let's say the journal Elsevier comes up with a new, nano, bio, chemo, biomaterials journal, and they want to ensure that it's included in the Web of Science database, because Web of Science, next to probably Google Scholars, one of our most highly used databases here on campus. How do you ensure that you get your journal into the Web of Science? So what happens is that the folks at Wiley or Elsevier, etc., they come up with a new journal, they submit that journal information to the folks at Journal Citation Reports, and they monitor how many articles are published in that journal, how many articles are published, how many times those individual articles are cited, and with that statistical information, they're able to come up with good ideas in terms of whether or not that journal should be added to the Web of Science. So I'm sorry, let's go browse categories. And so material science, multidisciplinary. So there's 336 journals within this broad classification, and you'll see things like Nature Energy, Nature Materials, Nature Reviews, etc. And of course, which ones have the highest impact factor? Okay, so journals like Nature, not surprisingly, Nature Materials, impact factor is 7. And if you want to, you can click on this and you'll see there should be a materials science, rare materials science, journal magnetics. You'll see the whole list here, and there should be a way to okay, let's just go to oops. Okay, for the fun, let's go to nature materials. So this is nature materials, who publishes it, etc., journal's performance, and here they come up with the journal impact factor information. So they talk about journal level metric calculated from data index from the Web of Science core collection, so on and so forth. And they talk about, so they look at, like I say, how many articles are published, how many times those articles are cited, and they do all this kind of, you know, statistical calculations. Some people love this stuff. Other people think it's, how should I say politely, less important. But you'll see that they come up with some calculations. So published, how many times the article has been cited, and this year is always a little, you know, data is always about a year behind, obviously. So, but this is one place you can use to find, you know, you can use to evaluate journals. Scopus has similar information, so you can go to the name of the journal. So let's say, you know, you can do a keyword search, come up with a list of journals, and they also have similar information, although Web of Science has their own criteria. The folks at Scopus call it something different. So those are two main places that you can use to evaluate journals. Like I say, journals that are, let's say, if American Chemical Society or Elsevier comes up with an open access journal in materials engineering or materials science, it will take some time for that journal to be added to the Web of Science collection. But I think if you think about, you know, the quality of Elsevier and Wiley, etc., if they're coming up with new journals, chances are they should be very high quality, very high repute, etc. And I know MDPI, a lot of their journals are indexed in Web of Science as well as Scopus. Now, one last thing we mentioned, or was mentioned earlier in the presentation, was about Creative Commons. So Creative Commons is just a licensing tool or licensing organization that talks about, you know, if you make your research freely available, what sort of licensing do you want around it? So the journal website is just creativecommons.org, but they have a very nice tool, and I've used this in other workshops, and it gives you some ideas in terms of, let's say you're going to make something freely available, you want to share your work. So what kind of license would be most applicable? So share and use your creative work or conditions on your choice. So there's a really nice website that kind of walks you through it. So you can choose some features. So we can click on Get Started and ask a number of questions. So license features. So allow adaptations of your work to be shared. I don't think so. And then this will kind of identify the kind of license that you might want to attribute to your preprint. A lot of times the journals may do this for you, but this gives you some background information about when you see something called, you know, CC BY, you know, 4, what exactly does that mean? CC BY ND 4.0, it tells you exactly what you're allowed to do and what other people are expected. So this is some background information on Creative Commons. So lots of things to digest this afternoon. So that kind of wraps up all the things I wanted to show you or discuss with you rather about preprints. You know, a great way to share information, but always think about, you know, when Mo asked me to do this workshop, absolutely the first thing that came to mind was the policies about preprints and prepublication. And I think that's something you really need to clarify with whatever journal you ultimately end up submitting with, and, you know, to make sure that that journal allows for the publication of preprints, whether it's on Arxiv or ChemRxiv or any other website for that matter. Make sure that you are very clear in terms of what is and what is not permitted by a specific journal or a specific list of journals, because you don't want to jeopardize the possibility of you publishing in a specific article, especially if it's really important for for your research, for your long-term career, etc. So those kinds of things to think about. And of course, if you have any questions at all about Circle, open access, so on and so forth, feel very free to contact me, and I can give you more detailed information. Another thing to be aware of course, is the NSERC policies. If you get funding from NSERC, what is the expectation? And you've got some different options there in terms of who you publish with. So if it's a journal with like Wiley, you've got 12 months, so nothing too serious. If it's a publisher like Elsevier, and their embargo is 24 months, which is outside of the 12-month requirement from NSERC, that requires some different steps, namely more money. So, but that's what I really wanted to cover this afternoon. So Mo, we've got 5 questions in the chat. Okay, so Hossein, I would go and look at that specific Elsevier journal that you've published with. Chances are, hopefully it's not it shouldn't be an issue. Hopefully it's not an issue, but just double check. I think the onus is on everyone to always be extra careful, but it may or may not make a difference. Same in the research bar. Oh, so same is a very unique command when searching for the Web of Science. So anytime you're doing an address search in the Web of Science, same only applies to address searching, and it tells the search engine to look for those keywords, as in university or engineering and university in Vancouver and British Columbia, in the same sentence. So that's why I used same. Any question about Web of Science searching or Scopus searching? You always feel very free to go contact me directly, and we can do something more detailed. So that is kind of what I want to talk to you about this afternoon. Any questions from anyone?
Thank you so much, Kevin.